First of all, I want to just thank you all for your time this morning. As communicators, I appreciate how much in demand you'll be this morning, as always. So it's always an effort to make the time, take the time out of work and do something different. So hopefully you can find something useful today. It's my job to bring something to you that you didn't know earlier today. What I'm hoping to do today is to talk about Microsoft Office 365 and how it can be used as a tool for communicators. What I'm not is I'm not affiliated with Microsoft directly. We're not paid by Microsoft. We don't sell the software, but as a communications agency, we've found it to be something that companies invest heavily in, something that they find either that they've gone for or they are given, and then have to find their way around using it as a platform, as a tool to communicate and build their comms out of. So we've, in our history, helped companies to do that, to find their way, to find out how it works best for them from a best practice, but also a very specific way of working. So this is really just a combination of all that experience, hopefully that you will find useful. My real goal today is to help you answer the question. If someone says to you in future, do you know anything about Microsoft Office 365? You can say, you know what, yeah, actually I do. I do know a little bit about Microsoft 365. I can help you out with that. So that's our goal for today. I'm assuming you're all coming to this with very different backgrounds. You'll be very familiar with some of the Office tools, but there are new tools coming, there's new ways of using those tools, and hopefully I can help start that journey today to set some new best practice and give you some specific takeaways as well. So I'm just going to go through. I'm just going to introduce myself as well. My name is Alan Coates. I'm from 44 Digital here in Leamington Spa. I'm a digital communications specialist. We have a strong background in internal comms, and my role here is that I'm the partner for the digital. I'm supported by my colleagues who are very editorial based, design based, development based. I can bring that team together to help solve digital problems. Today, we're going to go through a little bit more about 44 Digital, but very, very briefly. That's not what we're here today. And then go quickly into where we are from 2022 in terms of Office 365. Where are we in the current landscape? And then focus on Microsoft 365 for internal communications. Now, you'll notice I've called it M365, not O365, and I'll talk about that in a second. Big pardon, I just had a note from Andrew. You can't hear me. Is anybody else having problems hearing? It's just myself. Good. In that case, we'll carry on. Go from here. So, a little bit about 44 Digital. We are a virtual agency, which essentially means that we have a core team here at Leamington Spa, and we have a network of partners around us that we bring in based on what the project needs. So if it's a web design job, or if it's a strategic comms job, or if it's a editorial web job, anything like that, we'll bring in the best writers, designers, content specialists, technology specialists as part of our network. That does two things. It means we can be cost effective. Also means we can get the best people for the job. And all that goodness that comes with it. It can be quite cost effective that way. We have values that are really important to us. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of this today, where we talk about friendship is very important to us. We talk about friendship, but also it's not just friendly, but honest. Your friends are honest with yourself. When things go good, when things go bad, we're very clear about what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to do, what's the core of what we're trying to do together. Awareness, very much what we're doing today, being aware of what's out there in the industry, aware in your business, things like that. I think there's going to be a lot of that today. Creativity. Don't judge me on my slides. They're content led, they're not designed, but hopefully that you'll see a bit of creativity coming out today, especially if you're a SpongeBob fan, but no spoilers on that one. And excellence and teamwork speak for themselves, we hope. So that's just a bit about us, and that's what we're going to do today. I think we've got a couple of friends from our clients today joining us. I know that a lot of you will come through maybe the East Midlands network, maybe through the LinkedIn invite, but it's something to have you here today as we build on our friendship network. So, okay, straight into it then. The 2022 guide to Microsoft 365. The history is interesting and it's important. So Office 365 comes from Microsoft. Microsoft started with Bill Gates back in the day, did a very good job of collating lots of different pieces of code, and then brokered a deal with IBM so that every IBM machine sold had Microsoft on it, and that just became an absolute monolith. Software then had to work with Microsoft. Apple was doing its own thing. Lotus was doing its own thing over here with Linux. But Microsoft became the go-to for business software. Big Blue, IBM, all that jazz. In its time, Microsoft's Office suite, it became a suite rather than just individual Word or Outlook or Excel, packaged as a suite, and that became iterative. So you'd have Office 96, 95, 96, in 2010. It came as a package, came out every 4 or 5 years. It would have updates and upgrades, all that sort of jazz. And it was very successful. But I think what they found was, like their operating system, people would wait for 4 or 5 years, it would land, they'd pay a lot of money for it, and then maybe slightly unimpressed with the results. Actually, I've been waiting 4 years, I've just paid £300 for this. It's not that different. And actually, in terms of Word, there's only so far you're going to get with Word before actually it's just a publisher. It's you're writing words in the right, you got spell check in there, great. But apart from that, what else are you going to do? There's lots of stuff in the background for the real technophiles, but from a general user, they weren't seeing the benefits. So what happened was they started to go to a subscription-based model. So this is Office 365. We're going from Bill Gates into Steve Ballmer now, so the kind of early 2000s, mid 2000s. And Steve Ballmer was quite not draconian, but he said his number one priority as a business was making sure his delegates stayed in line. So it said a little bit more about the business, what was going on at the time. Office 365 moved to subscription-based, which was good for 2 reasons. One, it was an easier entry into that package. £6 a month feels a lot better than £300 at a go, even if it's over a few years. But also, all those changes and upgrades are becoming iterative. So now the software updates happen every so often rather than every 5 years. So you get the benefits iteratively, which is a better business model. So that's kind of the history of Microsoft. And then something very important happened. Then we had Satya Nadella, who joined Microsoft. I think Steve Ballmer's way of management didn't last very long, threw a few too many chairs perhaps. And then Satya Nadella came on board. Now, I just happen to have the book actually. So Satya Nadella's book, hit refresh. Very good book actually. It's interesting that his business plan model was very much around innovation, creativity, collaboration, where Steve Ballmer was very top-down driven. Satya Nadella is very collaborative, really far aim. Let's try some things. Let's spend a bit of money in this, all that sort of stuff. Interestingly, when he came on board as MD, the day after almost, then the Microsoft apps became available on Apple software, and the cross-collaboration became very much clearer, and he's very much focused on the cloud software, cloud computing, which is his background. So in the time that Satya Nadella's been there, since 2014, I think it was, they've very much focused on the cloud, very much focused on online collaboration. This has obviously been huge in the pandemic when people are working remotely, working hybridly, then working in the office again, having their office with them wherever they are has been huge. So this is kind of where we are in the middle, where it's not Office 365, it's Microsoft 365. There's so many more tools now around this model, around the user, around the company, that you bring all those tools together into a package, into a suite of assets, a suite of way of working around Microsoft. So technically it's Microsoft 365. I think people treat Office 365, Microsoft 365, one is shorthand for the other. It doesn't really make a difference, apart from when you're buying the software, perhaps buying a subscription license, because there are different ones. But essentially what we have is a suite of tools that we can build around what we want to do as a business from an operational point of view, but a communications point of view. What I thought I'd do, if it's useful, is I can just run through what the tools are, because I think we hear them and you might think, oh, Power BI, yeah, okay, it's part of Microsoft. But actually, what does Power BI do? Things like that will be really useful. So if this is something you take out from today, let's go a bit of a whistle-stop tour through all the tools that are currently available, and see if there's anything here that you think, actually, I might talk to my organisation about this, might be quite useful. So I'm not going to focus on the middle row. You see, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, Publisher. I think we're quite clear about what those do. If you're not, put them in the comments, I can talk it through. But those are kind of bedrocks. That's more the Office 365, which you're probably more familiar with. From Microsoft 365, let's start with Power BI. So what the cloud computing does for us, the cloud suite does, is it pulls all of our applications from a single source. And because we have that single source, we can then pull very interesting information. So in terms of what tools people are using, how long they're using it for, the data that's put into Excel, the data that's put into Access, pulling those into consolidating dashboards. So business information, rich visuals, live visuals as well, because the data is all in the same place. You can pull live as well. So Power BI can be really useful for kind of analytics and dashboards, especially when you're using some of the other tools as well. Another one that will work with that is the Power Apps. So this is sold as a no-code application platform. And when we say apps, it's partly mobile apps, but more just applications. So pulling, again, from those rich sources of data to build applications such as forms and surveys, and put them, not so much polls, but things that trigger based on the data you already have in your business. Here are some kind of database driven applications, but you can drag and drop. It's nice and easy. It's good for people to, like I said, about Satya Nadella, kind of the ready, fire, aim. I want to try something, but I don't want to spend £20,000 with the developer. I'm just going to do kind of proof of concept through Power Apps and work it through and maybe have some guidance. But it's a way of prototyping, a way of kind of getting to the medium viable product for certain things to prove the case. And if it works well, then you can get the funding, etc. That's the idea. Virtual agents, a relatively newer one we've seen some of the clients tackling with. There's two types of chatbot. One is you type in a message and then a real person joins and says, oh, hi, I'm Dave, I can help you out with something. That's great. This is the virtual side. This is where you can create certain responses to questions you think are coming. So you can put something in like a keyword. If anyone says the word holiday, say, oh, are you looking for a holiday form? Here it is. If someone puts a keyword in that says birthday, oh, by the way, do you know that we have a free cake on your birthday plan? Here it is. It's a way of predicting what people are going to be asking for. We've just done a piece of work where through the Microsoft 365, they're able to get a list of all the things that people are searching for, and they're using those search results, those keywords, to then form what their virtual agents then feed. Because we know people are searching for it, let's build into virtual agents, and then they can feed that back to them, so reduce the requests on the HR team. Power Automate is an interesting one. So this is something that Apple's come onto recently. They call it shortcuts. You might have heard it called If This Then That. It's a platform that does this. It's about combining different apps based on actions and responses. Good case study for this is working with a company doing their intranet, and what SharePoint doesn't do for them at the moment is when they publish a story by somebody, it then automatically sends an email to somebody to approve that story. Now that doesn't exist in SharePoint, but through Power Automate, you can create that sequence. I'm so-and-so, I published this story because of what we have in the system, that then goes to so-and-so to approve that story. They can approve it through the email, respond to the email, then that publishes that story. Or if they choose to, they can go in and edit the story and then publish it. So there's an automation there, there's a process there that they built through Power Automate based on how they want it to work. SharePoint, you will have heard of, and there's a whole legacy of SharePoint and intranet with a capital I or a lowercase I in terms of this is what, in my head, SharePoint looks like. SharePoint's gone on a very good journey lately. The SharePoint Classic, which is probably what's in your head, very boxy, very hyperlinky, very structured, and not very, very interesting to look at. If you can, focus more on SharePoint Modern. This is more templated from SharePoint. There's a whole lookbook out there, which is great to look at, and someone may put it in the comments if they're familiar with it. There are Teams layouts, news layouts, collaboration layouts, communication sites. Microsoft's done a lot of the heavy lifting to make some of these layouts look really good. Then your content can do a lot of the personalization rather than having to build a page from scratch. What's also good about SharePoint Modern is because they're templated, a lot of the web parts are much easier to get to, much easier to choose and pick from. You don't do a lot of the custom development that you used to do with SharePoint Classic. So SharePoint Modern is the benefit of, it's the balance of less customization but quicker access to those things. You can still do custom dev on it, but it really is a bit of a watershed moment for SharePoint and a bit of a resurgence and renewal for SharePoint. But essentially, it's a bedrock of data and content that you can build from. And I'll talk about that in a second. Database management through Access. This is one of the legacy tools. It's still there. It's in the cloud. I think you probably need a PhD in data analysis to really worry about Access, but it is the most useful thing in the world for the people that like Access. I'll say no more about that. Outlook, it's Outlook. It's emails and calendars very closely together. A little bit of tasks in there, which is another tool. It really is based on emails and calendars, and it runs off Microsoft Exchange. So Microsoft Exchange is the piece of, it's the bedrock really of Microsoft 365, sits below everything else, from which then emails and calendars, but SharePoint works off, OneDrive, all kind of comes from Exchange. We're doing a program at the minute where companies moving from a group to a local Exchange server. There's a whole suite of things that people need to do, but it's actually much more straightforward for the user. But from an IT point of view, it's a big piece of work. So it's about building that bedrock, laying the tracks as the train is running, I guess might be the metaphor for that one, but it's really important to get right, and then you're running. To mix my metaphors. OneDrive, very much cloud-based file saving, but also very heavily on sharing. So working on live documents, working on shared folders, both inside your organization and outside the organization. The new kind of Exchange, Microsoft 365 accounts have at least 1 terabyte of data to start off with, which is plenty enough for the regular user. So having files in there, sharing them. There's also the conflict about file like kind of legacy. Is it on OneDrive? Is it on your private server in the business? Where do we keep the latest version? That's something that the business needs to get right from day one before they get OneDrive installed. Otherwise, you're going to have lots of different variations of files. But that's good, and one we've tackled before and got right. Microsoft Planner, you may have dealt with. This is the team task app. There's another one for personals. Team task app based on the Kanban process, so kind of the cards that you move across from to do, in progress, completed, finished, etc., etc. Multiple boards. The boards can then be calendarized. You can see them by calendar. You can see them by who's owning what. You can see breakdown of tasks per person. You can see them as a task by status, so how many are to do, how many finished, how many just about finished. So it is really useful for that. We started using that for 44 Digital. We're finding it really useful, especially with working across teams. We've got a whiteboard here, but no one's in the office. So it's nice to have everything in a digital place. So those tasks linked to who's owning it, linked to when it needs to be done by, can be really, really useful. I think it's better for a smaller team because once you start to get to 100 people, the calendar looks very, very busy and it doesn't have as much impact. So I think for a team of 5, 10, 15 people, it's perfect. For anything more than that, you're probably going to use something else. Moving to some of the later ones, Teams you will be very, very aware of because you're using it right now. I have had a question from someone before the call today talking about how can we make the best of Teams. So I'll be going into more detail about this one. But just to say early doors, I was talking about SharePoint being a bit of a bedrock. Did you know that when you create a new team on Microsoft Teams, it creates a SharePoint site? Within there, you can then change the settings for that Teams. You can create content that lives under that Teams site, and Teams, you can go to SharePoint and have more content there. So interesting to know, when you create a new Teams page, Teams team creates a SharePoint site underneath it to host all that content, log all those files, all the messages, all the context. So that's useful to know. Yammer is the private social network for your organization. I think they've become slightly concerned that Teams is becoming so successful, it's actually detracting from what Yammer's purpose is. I think Yammer's is more kind of news-based, feedback-based, emoji-based, thumbs-up-based. I think Yammer's turning into more of that because people are already on Teams. Well, they go to Yammer to do what they can do, chat with in Teams. So they are, I think, going to slightly think about Yammer and how they position that. And we'll talk about something in a second about how they package up some of these apps. I think Yammer's in a bit of a personality crisis at the moment. That might change in the future, or might get archived or changed or rebranded. We'll see in the next coming weeks and months. Stream, as you can tell by the icon, is the play button. It's the YouTube for your organization. It's where you can host video, share it internally, share it externally. It's depending on your perspective. YouTube is owned by Google. Stream is run by Microsoft. If you want to keep it in your own environment, share video internally, you get all the benefits without having to worry about are we using Google's code, security issues, etc., etc. So stream if you can, YouTube if you can't, I guess might be the phrase. Microsoft Lists, it's kind of says what it is really. You create your lists, tick them off, allocate them to people. You can create combined lists with teams, which conflicts a little bit with some of the things that they've got going on. It's quite a basic one, but I think that that's probably going to go the way of Yammer perhaps because there's other apps that do the same thing. Booking is quite new, but it serves a purpose. I think what they found from Power Apps, to get it right. Power Apps, people were building booking forms a lot, and they saw that and thought, actually, well, let's just build our own app out of it. So the Bookings app is a way for people to create a form that they can share externally for customer service or hospitality or whatever it might be, a booking form pulled internally. So it's just built around that one core function. Forms we use lots of for surveys. It works very much like SurveyMonkey or anything you might be familiar with. Keeps it within the Microsoft network, dead handy. Keeps all the data within your own environment for security. You can also lock it down for just your users. Usual things you can do, bullet points, radio lists, kind of measured framework of 1 to 5 or free text or one word answers, things like that. Which then builds into things like my analytics. What analytics is it's my information. So I can go into my analytics through the apps and it shows me my working patterns. It can do recommendations for how much time I should build in each week for, not necessarily non-screen time, but non-meeting time. And it'll start to put things in your calendar to say, okay, have some time here where you just got your head down. Don't worry about meetings. You've got too many. What it doesn't do as a company, show you analytics for your employees. I think they've made a conscious choice about that. Just saying, I want to see my own data, but I don't want everyone else to see, my well-being information. I think it's very personal, very introspective and personalized. So it isn't that, it's just for me to look at, and you can tell me, I can look at it and feel better about my way of working. To do is the task list that works through Outlook. It is separate from Planner and it's separate from Lists. So it's again, they've got a little bit of duplication here. To do can one or two of the apps that they have for this is very calendar based. So you can have a task, but then because it works with Outlook and it's got your calendar right there, you can link it to your calendar and your tasks appear in a calendar form, a little bit like Planner, but just for yourself. So that is handy. How they work with Microsoft Lists in the future, I don't know. And then Sway is drag and drop online presentations. I'll probably extend this to emails, newsletters, and newsletters. I'm going to talk more about this as well, because another question we had along with the Teams one was, what is Sway? How can it work? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about Sway in just a second as well. There's a lot of applications there. Lots of different things, 20 odd different applications all doing different things. And I think Microsoft have appreciated this. And so what they're moving to in the future, in the coming months, you might have actually seen some of these things already start to pop up. I'm not quite sure why they're not doing a bit more of a fanfare about this, is Microsoft Viva. Now, Microsoft Viva is split into 4 different categories: connections, insights, topics, and learning. And what they're doing through Teams predominantly is packaging some of those experiences together. So some of those apps will, 3 or 4 apps in a package. Here are some guidance on how to use these apps together for Viva connections to tell stories. Or I suppose in this case, collaborate. Insights, topics, learning, packaging those apps together through a smaller number of experiences, so that people don't get snowblind by 20 apps and not know what they do. So this is coming. I think there's going to be more talk about these. I think the connections one, insights one, I think are starting to roll out. I think learning and topics is a little bit more time put together to properly communicate to the user what they're for, how they work. I'm sure there'll be lots of training on webinars about these directly, but these are coming. This is a way of taking away the granularity of all those applications from a communications point of view and making it simpler for communications owner or personnel to decide how best to use Office 365 in a smaller but more practiced way, I guess. There'll be more about this, but we can still use the apps individually in the meantime as part of our suite. So that's kind of where we are from today. We've got all the apps in there, depending on the package you have, of course, as a business, but most of those are very, very common. Then there's Viva coming down the line, but then what do we do? Well, how do we use that for our comm strategy from a tactical level onwards? So what I was going to say is, if anybody's not read the Engagement Success Report, it's quite an old one now. I think it's from 2009, if I'm correct, but sets out 4 key enablers of internal comms in businesses, and we'll keep it in suspense. Here they are: leadership, engaging managers, body voice, and then integrity of the business. So I kind of gave myself the task, okay, if that's internal comms enablers, how do we use Office 365 to enable those enablers? And what I put down was, for leadership, what I think Office 365 has done is remove the glass office. So the CEO is now no longer on the ninth floor. The CEO is no longer in a glass office, soundproofed with the CFO. What they are now is on Teams, just like everybody else. Now, depending on your organisation, maybe less so, but it's kind of even the playing field. So when they're on a call, they're on a call just like you. When they're on a video, they're on a video just like you. And I think there's a barrier that's broken down there, because you might be seeing the CEO in their house, you might be seeing the CFO, in their garden on the call. I think there's a leveling of the playing field there, culturally, visually, that enables that leadership capability. So being very visible through Yammer and Teams when they're on calls, I think is really important. Having a say in the SharePoint news, we're just doing another internet launch, separate one, and we need the leader to be the one to tell everyone about the internet's live. So putting them at the front of that news story, we have put this in place. It's based on the strategy that we've helped to put together. I am asking you to be a part of that. I think it's really, really important. Simple thing is, I'm seeing lots of people here today. I'm seeing an RJ and an RA. I'm not seeing any profile pictures. Having profile pictures is really important so people know who they're talking to. I know I've turned all your cameras off, which would enable that as well. Having cameras on, microphones on, I think it's really important. And then utilising Sway, virtual town halls, visibly communicating and commenting when there's a comment on there, jumping on board, making sure as communicators we let them know how important it is that they have a voice when these conversations are going on. It's not just for everybody else. They have to have a voice when things are going on. And the suite gives them a quick, visible and level playing field to do that. In terms of engaging managers, I thought about this and thinking about, okay, well, daily virtual meetings. We have daily meetings here where we're going through, okay, what's on the to-do list today, what the block is, what the issues, what the opportunities, and we have that opportunity to kind of work as a team, no matter where we're working. We can have the shared tasks list and planners for the visibility of ownership of tasks, and the holistic view of, okay, how many people, I've got 20 tasks here, I've got 3 people, one person's doing 18. Okay, let's just make sure I can manage that slightly and make sure people's workloads are fair. Talking about shared meetings, shared documents, all about collaboration. Our friend here, all about collaboration, that's built into the software. So using that to the best of ability based on how the company works, based on how your team works. Voice is very important. A colleague of mine and I used to work with a company, and they unleashed Yammer with no real guidance, but a lot of fanfare, and they became the 3rd biggest Yammer user in Europe, I think, was the statistic at the time. Now, a little bit more guidance would have been useful, but for that company, there's an appetite for having a voice. They wanted to have their say. They were very, for the most part, very, very positive. They were very happy to talk about charity, very happy to talk about news. So giving people a voice is nothing new. What Office 365 does is give that to them 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So things like visible when their camera's on, their voice is on, streams, forms, comments and advocacy, one-to-many, one-to-one. I'll talk more about that in a second. But then you've got all this voice. Making sure that voice is heard and responded to is very important. The quickest way to reduce the voice is to just let it happen and do nothing about it. If you say that's a great comment, or hi guys, no, there's 100 comments here, I can't respond to everyone, however I really appreciate all your comments today, we'll take it on board. Things like that go a million miles. For people who have never had a voice to now having a voice, to proving the use and the purpose and the value of that is our job as communicators, to play that back in the news stories. When we're writing a news story, we can crowdsource now about that topic and pull out the comments, and so from Brentwood says this, Lucy from Swindon had a great opinion. Let's build that into the stories. It's all there for us. Let's just build that back into the communication back to people so that they feel that their voice is heard, which is going to enable more comments, more engagement. And then finally, the integrity side. So behavioural, consistent with values, we can track that slightly. This is slightly more tenuous. I think this probably belongs outside of teams, really. So I think this is more about, let's do what we're saying we're going to do. We can track that back. I said I'm going to do this. The tasks have got ownership. I'm owning planner. Let's make sure we do that. With the calendarization of meetings and calls and tasks, I think we have an obligation to make sure we're doing those things, and we can track that back. And it's not on someone's notebook. It's all there for everybody to see. So I think there's a part of that. Integrity with a capitalized, much bigger. It's more about values and living those outside of when we're not being seen, I guess might be the phrase. So it's in there, but I think that one's slightly more tenuous. The other ones I think are really, really worthwhile. Next thing I want to talk about is the 3 pillars of digital, what's the phrase? Digital maturity from a digital communications point of view. There are 3 pillars, and I'll walk through these. The first one is, from a digital communications point of view, digital channels point of view, do I have the information I need to do my work? I think a lot of us had this in the past couple of years. If people are working at home, can they access the server? Do they have access to their emails? Can they get onto the VPN? People who never had machines before are getting machines. People who never had mobile phones before are having mobile phones. Can they do the job at a base level? So from an Office 365 point of view, making sure that Exchange piece is set up. I'll put people working in the same environment. We've had a lot of work where people are on different instances of Microsoft 365, especially on a group level. We're on the group one, you're on the UK one. We can't talk to each other. We can't share files with each other because we're on different Office 365 domains. There's been a lot of work in the past to consolidate that so people can work together when they're not face to face, and that's what Exchange helps to do. Then the audience part through something called Active Directory, which you're probably aware of, is my Office 365 account. Does it have my name, my role, my location? Does it have band or who I'm working with, etc., etc., so that when we're customizing some of these experiences for them, we can say, okay, show this content to only the people who need to know it. So their location or their role, or line managers only, or senior leaders only, etc., etc. So building that audience from ground up is really important. And then you've got the basics. So OneDrive, Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, that kind of middle row we talked about. Do they have access to that? Do they have the right business account? Is it on the machines? Do they need it on their phones, etc., etc.? That's what we've been working over the past 2-3 years. The next level is then creating a place that not only can I do my job, but I can collaborate with my colleagues. So from this point of view, then we're talking about all the new stuff that Satya's brought in. So the Yammer stuff, the MS Teams, less so collaboratively, the planner list and forms. It's about where I can go to speak to my colleagues, hybrid and virtual. It's where we can plan stuff together live. There's a lovely piece of Teams, which not a lot of people know about, is in Teams you can set up a whiteboard and you can draw and type on a whiteboard and work remotely, then save that down somewhere. Not a lot of people use that, but if you're inclined, by all means look for it. There's lots of different apps you can build into Teams as well, which I know people have done, things like Slido for kind of collaborative word clouding and all that kind of jazz. It's a place to collaborate with my colleagues, and that's exactly what Microsoft's business plan is all about: bringing people together, having those ideas, recording those ideas, and then having a place to then fulfill those ideas. And then thirdly, at the top of the pyramid, is creating a truly digital workplace. Now, we were talking about this a few years ago about, okay, how do we create the virtual lobby? You go into a platform, how do you feel like you've got the front desk, you've got, remember, not the canteen, but you've got the filing cabinet, you've got the meeting rooms, you've got your desk, you've got the notice board, all the library, the archive, the IT team, all that sort of stuff. How do we virtualize that? How do we digitize that? I think technology has caught up a lot in that time, and actually Office 365 does a lot of heavy lifting for us. What that means is that we're using things like the Viva experiences that come in. It's about being a mature user of MS Teams. And I'll talk about that again, like I said in a second. It's not just about calls. There's so much more that I can do, one-to-one, one-to-many, etc., from a senior leadership point of view, etc. All that good stuff. Also, utilizing some of the Power BI stuff, the apps, the automate, all those kind of bits and pieces that it might be a manual process to do a thing. We can now automate it. We can now put it to one place. We can now build that business information behind that and prove the case. So that's kind of the pyramid, or the steps that we normally take about creating intranet specifically, but digital workplace environments. It's those 3 pillars. Do people have the policies and documents and the access they need? Can they talk to people, share best practice, and reach out to the people they need, no matter where they are in the world, in the business, at home, in the car? And the truly digital workplace is, I think, something that people are slightly afraid of. They don't want to get rid of the office entirely. There are benefits to face-to-face, because that's our human nature. However, when people are working remotely, do they still have that experience of working in an office? Do they not lose anything from that experience? So they can fulfill their job. Now, if you're looking at this and it seems familiar, and I only noticed this morning, is because that colour scheme and that shape look a little bit like Patrick from SpongeBob. So I do apologise for that if anyone's thinking, why does that look so familiar? That's probably why it looks so familiar. One of the questions I had before jumping on the call was Sway. I've heard about Sway. I've heard it's going to replace my email newsletter, but what does it do? Can you give us some idea about what it can do, some metrics, maybe some top 10 tips? So if you'll forgive me, I'm going to switch to my screen and I can show you a little bit if that's useful. I'll just do this. So Sway is what Microsoft are really calling their newsletter platform. It's online publishing, and it's really useful. And I think this is going to become more and more important for us as communicators as we go through. So going from the top, I think there are 10 things I can talk about today, which will be hopefully value to you. It might be that you start using this to create a test case. It might be instead of PowerPoint, you use this. Instead of the next newsletter, you use this. It'll be interesting to know. What I would say from the start is you can create blank. Or you can start from a template, and I would suggest starting from a template because you're going to get a nice idea of what it can do straight off the bat. So start fresh or start from a template, and then, oh, hang on, this isn't all right in the notes. There we go. Let's try again. Nice and secure, actually. Let's try that again. Start from a template. I like the one with the trees. Let's go with the trees. So what we have initially is two ways of looking at things. There's storyline and design view. So storyline is about building the content. So what are your headers? Let's build some headers, let's build some content, let's add some content in there. And then design is, okay, what's it going to look like when we go into it? This is how people will see it. This is how you build it. So storyline is how you build it. Design is how you view it. The thing to know is you need to create headers. So you see these things, these are headers. Headers are essentially pages or sections. Depending on how you view it, headers are how you break up the content. So a little bit like the web, but they've been extra and overt about this. So got one header here, strategic overview, one header here, our inspiration. So we go to the design view, you can see that we have one header there, then the next header will be strategic overview, the next header is our inspiration, etc., etc. That's how we build it through. Headers are your pages, essentially. Then we can add text, add images. So we've got some nice text cards here, got some boilerplate stuff in there, but let's add something else. Let's add an image. What's interesting is there's lots of kind of tactical, license-free-ish images all around here. So if I put in something like, let's stick with SpongeBob. Hopefully nobody's here from the Cartoon Network environment. We'll put a nice picture in there. We can do galleries as well. So let's put a gallery. Let's call it a gallery stack gallery. Let's load some images in. And this is going to start doing some of the heavy work for us. Start giving us options for captions. A good one. Comparison images. So let's try image. Let's do. Put an image in. Oh, another image. Let's do comparison image. Let's have our before picture and our after picture. And we can do audio and slideshows as well. So let's do audio. Do I have any audio? No audio, but we'll put one in there as placeholder audio. And let's do a video, which I think we'll have here as well. So let's say, go for our friend Patrick. He has a last name. Start. Put that in there. That gives us a lot of content that we just dropped in. But if we take a look at the design, what's that done for us? So this is our header, and this content is all in there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the style of the design because we've got three options we can choose. We can choose vertical, like a newsletter, horizontal flowing, like inline, and then horizontal slides. So I'm going to go for vertical. I think so we can see the content nicely. So we're now going top to bottom vertically. So here's our first header. We go down to our next header. Provide a quotation, lovely, lovely. We've got our comparison image here that's done that automatically. If you're a BuzzFeed reader, you'll recognize that. So we've got a video that's in line. We've got another image there, lovely. And then we've got a stack. You can click the stack, it cycles through automatically for us. That's nice and easy. That's not about 60 minutes work if you like SpongeBob. If we go back to storyline, there's a lovely piece that they've included called focus points. Now, if you're doing a header as a header image, you can see that it's kind of deciding where to crop it. because, okay, I recognise the face, I'm going to put the face in the middle. However, I might want the focus point to be that. So now, when it resizes, when it reshapes, the focus is going to be on that element there, which is plankton. However, if I want it to be Mr. Krabs, I'm going to point it here, make sure he's the focus. That when it goes down to horizontal, he's there. What I could do, Gary. So depending on where you put your focus point, that's the anchor for where it's going to resize the image for. So I'm going to put it back to Bob, and then we're good. So that's worth knowing, because when you're doing header images, lead section content, you're going to make sure your focus point is exactly where you want it to be. What else do I want to talk about? We talked about the 3 different styles. Once you have it ready to go, you're happy with it, I might just try the slides actually, show you that one. This one might be a bit more PowerPoint-like, I guess, might be the phrase. Let's go play, do this. Here we go. And there we go, right. We got our first one. So I have to play through. Everything becomes full screen. You give everything a bit more airtime, a bit more focus. The stack becomes a bit more linear. Videos, all good stuff. When you're sharing it, you can do a couple of things. You can have it where you can target only people that work in your business. You can have it that anybody within the organization with just a link, or anyone with a link, you can share it externally as well. So when we're talking about an email newsletter, it'll probably be the vertical version, and it'll probably be that you don't embed this into the email, but then you can create a nice looking presentation or newsletter flow that you then link to from your newsletter. The email itself could be quite succinct, quite short, and then this goes to Sway, where you have all your content. You can also do some lovely things where you do autoplay. So it could be that instead of a manual click through, you can set it to autoplay. That instead of having to click right and left or down or up, you autoplay it. So it almost flows like a video, like an experience, and you have it loop continuously and all that. So that's worth knowing as well. So if I skip back to my presentation, if you bear with me 1 second, let me go to this. Where am I? Go back to my presentation. I think that was worthwhile, just a little sway into Sway, we might exist. Let's go back to where we were. So let's go back to our top 10 list then. So we're talking about things like how Sway can play. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. So you can create a Sway from fresh, like a blank page, or you can use a template to build from and just edit the content within. I think templates are a good way to find out what it can do, what it can't do, and find out what works best. Especially the structures, the kind of the linear versus the scrolling right versus the slides right. I think it's good to get your eye on that one. Use headers to create sections, which then translate into pages and areas, especially if you're going right from the slides. You've got text, images, galleries, which was a nice stacked one, comparison images, audio, slideshows based on your material. You can choose those focus points on the images and also the videos, so that when it responds to mobile, when it crops down, it points to the right part of the picture, which I think is a really nice touch. You can create visual styles where you can either add in your own custom fonts and images and make it branded. You can make a branded template for your company, Andy. I just saw your comment then. Thank you for sharing that. You can create a universal style and then share that with your team. Then you can just utilize a lot of the styles that are in there. Some are kind of black and white, some are a bit more colorful and garish. Of course, if you use PowerPoint, you know what that looks like. You can choose a different style of presenting, so the vertical down, the horizontal fluid, I guess might be, or the kind of the static slides as it go through. You can have it autoplay or not when you share it. You can then share it via link for either everybody who's got the link, people in your organization only, or you can password protect it for financial reports, things like that. That's useful. There is some analytics, and this is a question we had per slideshow or per Sway. You can see how many people viewed it, what the engagement was, which is done as a percentage, which I think is probably how far do people get through it. So the engagement might be that 50%, which might be an average of how many people versus how much they read is your engagement percentage. Then you get time spent on it, and then average completion, which again is built on that engagement. Hopefully you want 100% of people have completed 100%. That's something they include. So not your average kind of Google analytics, but useful ones, I think. So that's Microsoft's way. And then the other thing I was going to mention today to finish it off is Microsoft Teams. So the question we get is, okay, we're using Microsoft Teams, but what can we do to get more out of it? And there are many ways of doing this, and it means going back to internal comms basics and best practice. So Teams is a tool, and we use that tool. Give a hammer to me, I can't build your house. Give a hammer to someone who's a professional, they can build a house. So Microsoft Teams is a hammer, but what can that hammer do? So thinking from a comms perspective, you've got your one-to-one, and this is probably what we're doing most of all. It's the messages, it's the calls, it's the quick videos, conferences, sharing files, maybe even the whiteboard if you've had to play around with that one. It's Andy sending me a quick thumbs up just now. It's me sending a note to my colleague saying, by the way, we've got that thing, without having to email, without having to call. It's the one-to-one. It's probably 80% of what we do on Microsoft Teams. But what can we do more than that? So this is then the one-to-many. So this is more like what I'm doing today. Now I have set today's call up as a webinar, which is a relatively new one. But if it wasn't, I could still do this as a meeting. So it's one-to-many. I can do the screen share. I can share files, but I can also record the video and auto transcribe. If I've set it up as a meeting. Now, if I call someone out of the blue, can't record it. If I set it up as a meeting and they join it, then I control over recording their video and auto transcribing. Did some research recently. The auto transcribe is about 85–90% good. You will have to edit it if you want it to be pitch perfect, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's actually not so bad. So that's very, very useful, especially if you think like today, where you want to record something as a bit of an asset. If you want to do something where you've got a conference, you want to record it for people who can't attend and then share it afterwards for people who can attend the virtual event. That's very, very useful to know. So one-to-many, very, very important. Then we start to talk about many-to-many. So this is when you start to think about it as a kind of production tool and a kind of conference tool. There's everything you get from one-to-one, one-to-many. Okay, you set up as a meeting again, but then you get options for breakout rooms and the kind of video conference side of it. You start into whiteboard. You start looking into adding extra applications to your Teams so that when you're doing a video call like this, I can then show Slido. I can then pull in things like SurveyMonkey or Hive to do live polls. It's about creating more of an experience through Teams because it has that application whitelist, which you go into Teams and go to applications at the bottom left-hand corner, so you'll have a notification for it. What your company's allowed, you can then install onto your Teams and then use those apps as part of your call. The breakout rooms can be done, I think, either automatically or you can then dictate which people go into which rooms, and then that is something that's newer, something that as a conference level, if it's a whole day, I think people find really worthwhile. So that's kind of the many-to-many where people have that say back. And then the other side is the many-to-one. So I'm here today, I'm talking to you, kind of one-to-many. However, you're sending me messages. I'm getting messages from Sammy and Joe and Justine and Andy, and you're telling me things all together through the comments, through the polls, the GIFs. And if you're feeling brave, you can also choose together mode. I think if it's a call, I might not be able to take it webinar. But the idea that I'm speaking, but you guys could be chatting away in the meantime. I'm going to ask for some of your best GIFs if you've got GIFs enabled in your Microsoft Teams in a moment. It doesn't have to be SpongeBob related. That's all absolutely fine. I have a particular GIF that I like to go to. Let's see if it's on here. That usually I use to represent the middle of there it is. Middle of my presentation, so I'm going to use it to represent the end of my presentation today, which is the famous backwards dancing potato, which never fails to make me laugh. It's about giving people a voice, even if I'm talking, even if it's a CFO, if it's a CEO, we can be talking in the background. We have someone on the right hand side. Thank you, Andy. It is definitely Friday. Hope we're all feeling like that. It's about having an opportunity for people to comment, even though the big picture is being displayed. So that's kind of my talk today. We've talked about Office 365 and the history of Microsoft. We've talked about Office 365 in terms of the different applications that are available. We've talked about it from an internal comms point of view, how can enable those 4 pillars of internal comms enablement. We talked about it, the 3 pillars of digital maturity. We talked about at Sway and how that can be used to build newsletters. I would recommend having a good hour playing on Sway today. If you spend an hour on it, you'll be in the top 20% of the people in your company who can do Sway immediately. It's going to become the new PowerPoint, so just think about what PowerPoint is now. And then we talked about Teams and how we can use it from a comms perspective, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many, as we talked about. Thank you for sharing your gifts. Thank you for sharing your time today, and I hope it's been useful. And do let me know if you've got any comments on the question. We've got another 5 minutes. If you're happy to drop off. If you've got any questions, please stay online. I'll answer as many as I can. And it's been wonderful to speak to you today. Thank you.